Alright, hello, my name is Stephen O'Sullivan, and I'm presenting on open source. So, what is open source? Open source is software that is available for everyone to use in a format. To understand this a little better, let's look into how open source came around. So, the start of open source. So, imagine there's a problem with your computer you could fix, but you weren't allowed to. This is a problem that was prevalent for a lot of people in the 1980s and like 1990s with computers, because a lot of computers and printers and anything else they use had little black boxes that couldn't be accessed because the source was closed. So if you had a problem, you had to go and call your technician or the company you bought it from to send it out, and if it's a simple issue, it really frustrated a lot of people. And yeah, this is a common problem for many. Frustration caused a new idea. And that new idea was, what if there was a source that was available for all? What if there's code available for all? That would take away from the black boxes, and people could go into the computer and see what they're actually working with and what code they're using and software they're using. And so this gave birth to open source. And benefits of open source today are the basically non-existent licensing fees. Open source is easy to manage. Open source can be continually improved upon. There's company independence from the source, and it's easily explorable. A lot more easily explorable than open source, closed source. So licensing fees. Open source is shared free software network. So most of the time there are no fees. There are a few exceptions to this where it does cost money, but it's nowhere close to a closed source operating system. As you can see in this graphic, closed source operating systems and open source operating systems cost nowhere near the same amount. Even when open source does cost money, it's usually for like IT experts and like people to come and consult about that system. And usually it doesn't cost anything, so it allows you to focus more on your business and save your customers money, which is really important. Open source is really manageable. It's a source that can be accessed by all, which means that all your workers and everyone who works for you and everyone in the company can access the source at all times, which is good because you don't have to pay for individual people to get the source, so you don't have to pay for every single one of your employees to be able to access the source. So if they come across a problem, they can fix it themselves. Continual improvement. So all over the world, people can access the source at any time, any place. So basically 24/7 people are working on or working with a code, and maybe the code that you were using or interested in using in the future. So you're basically getting free labor. People are working on these codes, and you're not paying anything for it, and it's just constant improvement. Like, person in America be working on a code and go to bed, and a person in India can pick up and start working with that code. And as soon as they go to bed, someone in Spain picks up and starts using that code. So it's always being improved upon. And also there's a company independence. So companies may start up using codes and working with them, put them out there for everyone to use, and that company may fail due to various reasons, but that code doesn't die because the code's open for everyone so they can access it. So if that company dies, they may have the code go out there and maybe picked up by someone else, and then they use that code and they work out the kinks and they create a brand new code that is very successful. As you can see, these logos in the tree, in the diagram, show some really famous open source codes that have been picked up from dead sources. The penguin, the bottom left, is Linux. We'll talk about that later. And easy exploration. When problems arise, they're easily explorable. They're easy to solve. You can go into the code and see what's going on and what's causing the problem. This is different from a closed source where you have to call people and obtain the rights to go in and look at the code and see what is wrong. You can just go in and see if there's any bugs or anything that's affecting the code so it's not working the way it should be. Programs explore open source. Most popular is Linux. We just talked about that. Linux came from a dead source, and it's an operating system, much like Windows or OS X or iOS. But Linux is used by a lot of people who may or may not know it, and companies use it too. It's used on Android phones and like digital storage and video recorders and cameras. It was created in 1991 by a student in the University of Helsinki. It was written with C programming language. It proved to be one of the staples to the open source programming, and it's kind of the cornerstone of open source and the brainchild of that. Good, you need to get help in open source. You go into forums, since there's no official company website for a source because no one owns it. You go into forums to get help, and forums allow us for many solutions and testing. You can go in and you'll see what people have done and if it worked or not, and what you need to do. And this is really beneficial because I work in IT, and even we don't use the Windows or Mac or LG or any company, any computer software or computer making company. We don't use their websites to find problems. We usually go in forums because they're a lot more detailed, and people use say what they have done and what helped and what hasn't worked and what does work and what different problems there are with different softwares. So it's really beneficial. But there are also drawbacks to using open source. One of those is hiring experts, a dead source, and no help desk. So hiring experts, so we're using a source. There's a lot of sources out there for different things. You may find a source fits your company perfectly, but your IT department doesn't really know too much about it, and they're not very proficient in it. So you have to hire someone to come in and teach your company how to use the software and what to do if it goes wrong and what may go wrong with it, and just teach them all the ins and outs of the software. This would be kind of costly because since open source is a free software, these people tend to charge a little bit more. Dead source is when you're using a source and programmers have given up on it, and this is really common with newer sources that come out, sources that have been 3-4 years old or less. Then some programmers can give up on it. In some cases, someone may pick up on it later, but as for that moment, it's dead, and there's not much you can do with it. And the no help desk, I said as a benefit, but it's also a bit of a drawback because sometimes no one will respond, and if no one responds, you're kind of out of luck. You get no replies, you don't get any help, so you may have to wait a few days or weeks, and that's just not good for your company, and that can be a really big drawback. The future of open source, there's more and more companies switching to open source each year, with many companies planning on switching open source in the next 3 years. As you can see in this graphic, in 2010, only 75% of companies used open source, and projected by 2016 that 99%, and in the next 3 years, by 2018, the 100% will be using open source since it's so beneficial and versatile. So that's the question: could everything one day be open source, like the computer you use and all the technology you use? The benefits could make this a possibility, because people already use Windows or Internet Explorers like Firefox, and they use voice recordings like Audacity. There's many popular operating systems like Linux that make this a benefit. So to recap, the open source, there are many advantages to using this, and there's also a few disadvantages. However, the advantages to use open source outweigh the disadvantages, and when you compare that to the advantages and disadvantages of closed source, you can see that open source is clearly more beneficial to the individual in their company. And this is the reason why we're seeing open source boom. It took off slow from the 1990s. Linux was made in 1991 and is still being used today, like a lot of other programs. And we can see that this is being adopted by many companies and by many individuals. And hopefully in the future, everyone adopts open source. And these are my sources for finding out what open source is, who uses it, the benefits, closed source, disadvantages, everything like that. Alright, thank you.